corn, beans, and squash. These are three of the most important staple crops for me and Sylvan when we're living off of our gardens, and they've been filling that role for people in the Americas for thousands of years. You've probably heard these three crops called the Three Sisters, which is how many indigenous tribes from North America refer to them. There are a few different versions of the legend of the Three Sisters among the different cultures and tribes in North America, but the one that we're most familiar with is the Haudenosaunee version. As the story goes, very long ago, there were three sisters who lived in a field. The youngest was so small that she couldn't yet walk, so she crawled along the ground dressed in green. The middle sister wore a bright yellow dress and darted back and forth across the field. The eldest sister stood tall and straight, her body bent with the wind. She had long yellow hair and wore a green shawl. The three sisters loved one another very much and could not imagine living without the others. As the story goes on, it describes the strong bond between the three sisters and the relationship that they develop with the people from a nearby village. If you'd like to read the full story, we put a link to where it is on the Oneida Indian Nation website in the description below. Being the oldest sister, we always plant the corn first so that it can have time to grow tall and strong enough to support the climbing bean vines. We do this after the last frost and either plant them in traditional mounds or rows depending on which space we're planting them in. We have a small plot in our yard, and we also grow larger Three Sisters patches in 2 public community garden plots that we rent each year. We manage one of these with my parents and our nephews, and the other one we manage with some friends. Once the corn is about 1 or 2 feet tall, we plant our beans at the base of each stalk. Depending on the type of corn that we're growing and how vigorous the bean vines are, we plant 1 to 3 beans at the base of each stalk. About a week after we plant the beans, we plant the squash, the baby sister, which is the fastest growing of the three sisters. Once all three sisters are established, they create such a good environment for one another to grow in that the garden is more or less hands-off. Of course, we visit often to admire them growing and just spend time in the garden, but there's really not much work that's needed from us until the harvest season comes around. We grow a ton of different vegetables and fruits in our gardens, but for me, and I think Sylvan would agree with this, harvesting the Three Sisters is the most satisfying fall gardening activity. They're so full of calories and protein and nutrients that, we really feel like we're bringing in the sustenance that's going to keep us alive over the winter, which is just a really satisfying act. The oldest sister is the first to ripen, so our first fall activity is to harvest the corn. And we do this carefully, making sure not to rip up the bean vines or trample the squash while we're harvesting it. After the corn is dry and hanging around the house, we go out and pick the dry bean vines and then shell them and store them in glass jars once they're dry. Finally, we do a bit of an Easter egg hunt to collect the winter squash, which tends to hide under the big squash leaves. So we walk around the yard and then check to make sure the stem is dry, which signifies that the that the fruit is mature and ready to store for the winter. Then we cut them with a few inches of the stem intact and cure them on our porch until they're ready to store all winter long. As food, these three crops are so dynamic that at least one of them is featured in basically every meal that we eat in the winter when we're living off of the stuff from our gardens in the woods. Homegrown corn makes some of the best tortillas and tortilla chips that you will ever eat in your life. And the dry beans straight from the garden are a lot more flavorful, we find, than the ones from the store, which have often been, sitting around a distribution center for months or even years before they make it to the shelves at the store. Which doesn't mean they're bad to eat, they just don't have the same type of flavor as the fresh ones. And these winter squash and pumpkins are so sweet, they're like a butternut squash with honey on it. We really hope that you enjoyed this video and are feeling inspired to grow some of your own food this year if you're able to. If you are interested in learning more about how to grow and forage your own food, we want to remind you that we have 2 comprehensive online courses. One all about growing your own food and one all about foraging your own food. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to learn more. And if you qualify for SNAP, WIC, or other financial assistance programs, please feel free to send us an email about our sliding scale pricing options. See you next week.